Hello again to everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Charles Naton, your friendly guide, helping you to navigate the shadowy swamp that is the modern British state. This is my second video regarding the ongoing debacle that is the HS2 project. In the first video, we had a quick look at the stated accounts of HS2 Limited, the delivery company, and discovered that they've spent around about £38.4 billion so far without a single train ever running. Now let's not forget that Phase 2 of this project and HS2 East as well were cancelled as far back as October 2023. And of course, as is often the case with these things, there's been a recent reset of the project with revised costs and service start estimates. The revised costs of the project, don't forget the one part of it that's allegedly going to be completed, but we'll see, ranges between 88 and 102 billion pounds. And the start of service could be anywhere between 2036 and 2039. Now, bearing in mind that there's a very large gap of several tens of billions of pounds between the costs and 3 years between start of service dates, they're basically really not sure exactly how much the thing's going to cost or exactly when it's going to be finished. Because if they had a better idea, there would be a smaller gap between those two estimates. So the obvious question that follows on from that is, how did a group of presumably very experienced professionals end up in such an ungodly mess? How is it possible that a project has gone so badly wrong that more than half of it has had to be cancelled and the cost overruns are just spiralling out of control? I assure you this won't be the last estimate we have as to how much it's going to cost, but we'll get back into that a bit later. Probably the best place to start is to have a look at the delivery company itself, HS2 Limited, and just see what's going on there and how it really works. HS2 Limited has a board of directors just like any other company, and given the size of the company and the complexity of the project, it's not surprising to see a number of subcommittees sitting below and reporting to the board of directors, dealing with various issues as they come up. There's nothing unexpected about that. Moving on to the role of the Chief Executive and the Chief of Staff, we are starting to see suddenly here a very large number of directors of this, managers of that, and heads of the other. Now, I'll leave it up to the viewer to decide whether that's appropriate for a project like this, or whether it looks more like a job creation scheme for the laptop class. But there they all are, as set out in their reports and accounts. If HS2 Limited was just a normal company, that might be the end of the story. But, as we discussed in the previous video, HS2 Limited is not a normal company. It's wholly funded and therefore ultimately controlled by the Department for Transport, even though it's supposed to be arm's length. The DfT and the Secretary of State for Transport are the ones writing the checks and signing off on the direction of the project, at least on a large macro level. Now, the DfT, like any government department, is a large and sprawling organisation, so in here I've just put an example of some of the committees and subcommittees and other organisations like Network Rail and the soon-to-be created GB Rail, once the Railways Bill goes through next year, that will also have their fingers in the HS2 pie. Most people would think that's more than enough fingers in the pie, but no, we're not even close to being done yet. As HS2 Limited has had massive cost overruns, HM Treasury is the funder of last resort. They're the ones who fund the Department for Transport, and so ultimately they have a say as well in how money is spent and how much of it is getting spent. If the DfT runs out of money for the HS2 project, guess where it has to go? It can't go to the HS2 board, it has to go to the Treasury. But even then, we're not done, because HS2 Limited also has to deal with any political input from the Ministerial Task Force, which is organised by the Cabinet Office and is answerable to number 10, because it's a huge project and so it has large financial and political implications. So there's all kinds of different ministers could be getting involved and sticking their oar in as well, just for good measure. Although it's tempting to imagine that political influence at least ends with the Ministerial Task Force, that would be a mistake. Because one of the main aspects of HS2, one of the bits that's going to be completed anyway, so they say, is the massive Euston Station regeneration project. That means the Greater London Authority and more specifically the London Borough of Camden also have a say, as they will be directly involved in all the planning details. And that's not to mention all the other planning authorities that the line has to pass through. But for brevity, I haven't bothered listing and including all of them, but you can just imagine. So the only group left to mention now is the people who are actually going to run the trains if this thing ever gets finished, which I have serious doubts about. But if it ever does happen, we have the West Coast Partnership Development standing by and giving their input already about the trains and how they should be run. And within that you can see we have First Group and Trenitalia at the moment. But we'll see if that grows in the future. Any normal person looking at this labyrinthine mess of overlapping, uncertain and often conflicting responsibilities would take the rational view that somebody needs to have a good look at the situation and streamline the whole process. A review is what's needed. Well, luckily, we've had a review. In fact, we've had several reviews. We've had the Lessons from Transport report, the Oakervie review, the National Audit Office review, and the Stewart review. That's not mentioning at least 5 reports and reviews from the Public Accounts Committee. I'll repeat my earlier comment about the HS2 project now just being a job generation scheme for the laptop class, because despite the plethora of reviews and audits and hearings and committee reports, there's been little to no progress on actually streamlining the whole structure and bringing this whole unholy mess back into something approaching a reasonable budget and a reasonable timescale. It seems that the HS2 blob is impervious to all examination and all exhortation to change. A cynical person would say it had been designed that way to begin with. Now we have had the latest reset of the project, allegedly, with a higher estimated budget and a later estimated delivery time. But in the light of all these reports and audits and reviews, does anyone really have any confidence that the project will be delivered within these new guidelines and parameters? I, for one, certainly don't. There have been attempts to change it in the past, and these have been largely unsuccessful. So is there any reason to believe this new reset will be successful in the future? So here we are, left with this ungovernable mess, which is ever more expensive and seemingly impervious to any attempts to introduce meaningful change or control. Which leads us to the last big question, what to do now? Now, my highly qualified bloke on the internet opinion is that we should cut our losses and pull the plug, cancel the programme now. That will be, of course, extremely expensive. The estimate for cancellation cost is anywhere between 33 and 58 billion pounds. That's calculated at 2025 prices, by the way. That's an awful lot of money for basically ripping up what we built and filling in all the holes, or most of them at least. However, we have to compare that with the revised estimate for completion of 102.7 billion pounds. Now, I, for one, am very dubious about the estimated 33 to 58 billion it's going to cost to cancel the project. But I'm even more dubious about the estimated 102.7 billion that it's going to take to complete it. Every single estimate has been wrong so far, and there's no reason to believe that these estimates are going to be any better. So it's going to cost a fortune to cancel the project, but it's going to cost even more of a fortune to keep the project going to completion, if such a thing is even physically possible at this stage. There is also one more factor that doesn't seem to have been taken into consideration. Let's assume for a moment that the project is actually completed and the trains start running. Does anyone believe that HS2 is actually going to run at a profit? Just looking at the performance of Railtrack and all the different rail franchises, which, by the way, are still heavily subsidised by the government, is there any reason to believe that HS2, the railway, will turn a profit? Are people really going to want to pay top dollar to travel extremely fast from Birmingham to London, especially when they can just get on the internet and talk to someone for free? I'm highly dubious about the entire business model, which is why I think it would be cheaper and the better option to just cut our losses and cancel it now. I'm sure lots of people will have different views, but that's my take on the subject. Now that I've given you my bloke on the internet opinion, please feel free to comment, like, subscribe, share, Do all those cool things. It helps to keep the channel growing, and it does help to get the word out to people and make them more aware of exactly what's being done in our name and all the billions of pounds that are being squandered in our name. Because always remember, our ignorance is their power. Take care, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye bye for now.